Yo, what up, everybody? It's your boy Carson Fox with another edition of Fox on West Virginia Mountaineer Sports. After a week off, after talking some basketball, I had some ideas I was kicking around over last week to talk about that I think I'm going to talk about either later this week or into next week. But I had to come on and talk with you about the release of the West Virginia 2024 football schedule, officially kind of leaked online yesterday, Monday, but officially released by the Big 12 Conference today, Tuesday, January 30th. So I guess you can officially call this week one of the 2024 season and episodes, and we can put 2023 behind and look ahead to 2024 with everything that has undergone with roster management and transfer signings and high school signings and coaches leaving, coaches entering. Now with this schedule, you can make your travel plans, you can plan out how you're gonna spend your fall Saturdays and other days of the week, and we're already on to 2024. So I'm excited, and if you're a West Virginia Mountaineer fan watching this program, you should be excited too at the release of this schedule. Look, 7 home games. That's awesome. 7 fall Saturdays that you can take in games from Milan Puskar Stadium and partake in the festivities that are football games, and playing two, arguably the 3 of West Virginia's biggest rivals in the same season, with Pitt and Penn State splitting that series home and away. The investment that Country Roads Trust and you fans in particular, have put into this roster that has talent, that has the capabilities of contending for a conference championship with a young core, but also some savvy veterans who have that experience to contend. And now going into a 6th-year head coach in the development of this program along the Trust the Climb to make the ascension movement that I've been pushing for. The strides that this program made in 2023, I said, was a precursor. It seemed like 2023 was, turning of a page, turning of a corner, but that story still has to be, there's more to be written, I feel like, for 2024. So that's why I'm excited. I think the restructuring of the defensive scheme and philosophy that was already been announced by West Virginia, going to a 3-4 more traditional scheme outside. I still think we're still going to see the 3-3-5 and some sub packages and this, that, and the other thing. But that's exciting to me. Some new changes, new defensive philosophies. I think this is a great year to talk about to purchase season tickets. Mini plans. If you haven't been back to Milan Puskar Stadium since COVID-19 dropped in the 2020 season, this is a year, if you are going to make an investment into West Virginia football, financially, emotionally, this feels like 2018 to a certain extent. Different feel with a different kind of roster, but it's like that kind of enthusiasm. I think that's going to be my topic for that I was kind of mulling over the course of the last week, talking about tiered ticket pricing and the value for what you get out of the game day experience at Milan Puskar Stadium. So either later this week or next week, I'll get into that and break down some of the things that are on my mind and want to talk with you fans about. So that's really the good with the schedule. Here's the bad for me. And if you follow this program, and I've been talking about this for a long time with friends and family, is I still think that being in the Big 12 Conference limits West Virginia from reaching its potential. I will always contend that it is better for West Virginia to be playing its traditional geographic rivals than it is to be playing and traveling over 1,000 miles to play Baylor, Kansas State, now Arizona, Colorado in future schedules. This is not what I feel like you sign up for as a fan, and this is not what's best for West Virginia football. Is even with having, it's great. I love, like I said in the open, love having Penn State, love having Pitt on the schedule. That makes it for me. And it's nice that, like I said on one of my past videos, the West Virginia could come into the season, preseason, having 4 to 5 top 25 rated preseason teams on its schedule for the outlook for this year. So that's nice. But when you see that how many Kansas fans do you live by? How many Arizona State fans do you live by? We have this built in, and that's what makes college football great, are the traditional rivalries, the geographic rivalries, even though that West Virginia and Oklahoma State, as land-grant institutions, may have better cultural fit with some of their fans. And I've encountered Oklahoma State fans at football games. Wonderful people. Enjoy it. But they will never bring the kind of just like downright dislike and just the team you love to hate, like Pitt, like Virginia Tech do. So that's what I'll say. That's the only bad thing I will say about this schedule, from the most part, and the way it's formatted. And that's what I want to talk about this for this year, and predictions and all those kinds of things. And that's why, like, I don't want to criticize some of the other West Virginia pundits out there on YouTube and in the media who wanted to go and already talk about 2024 a day after the Mayo Bowl. But until we saw this schedule, that I don't think you can make an accurate prediction, because a schedule tells you so much. I think, at least on paper, until you play the games, until we know who's suiting up for both squads each week in and week out, yeah, that's uncontrollable. But until you see it on paper, I feel like you couldn't say good or bad. If West Virginia's schedule would have laid out the way that FBSschedules.com was laying it out for 2024, that they would have 5 straight home games and 5 straight road games, or however it laid it out, if you looked at it in the past month, like, it's totally different than what I feel like now that we can talk about with this team. So I don't know if I should necessarily take the time to walk through each opponent. If you can go on WVUsports.com, go on social media, find out who West Virginia is playing on which date. I'll go back and backtrack it when I talk about it game by game. So I don't know if I want to walk through every single game where the opponent is right now in totality. I'll just say, if you're taking a look at it as you're watching this video, either on your phone or you got it in a different tab window or whatever, looking at the schedule, my initial impressions, my initial takeaways, first glance at this schedule, is this has to be the hardest October that West Virginia's had since 2015, when West Virginia went 0 for October. I mean, that is a gauntlet. At Oklahoma State, home for Iowa State, home for Kansas State, at Arizona. Woo! That's going to be the meat right there. And then the thing is, then I'll lump August 31st kind of in with the same first grouping and call it September. But September ain't that much easier, folks. I mean, looking at Penn State on the road at Pitt, Kansas, it's like, whoa. So then you end the year off easier with Cincinnati, Baylor, Central Florida, and Texas Tech, but it's like, in those first 8 games, 10 weeks of the season is when we're going to know whether West Virginia is a contender or a pretender. But still, if I take a step back and look at it in totality, and you have to like that 3 times West Virginia has back-to-back home games with Kansas at home, sandwiched between the backyard brawl and a bye week. That's awesome. West Virginia plays 5 of its first 7 games at home, and that's all before October 20th. So if you're a fan, I deal with this week in and week out with my dad, who doesn't like going to games if it's below 50 degrees and if there's precipitation. He doesn't want to have to deal with that. Likes watching it from home and stuff. Like, doesn't want to take on the elements. We were at Texas Tech last year and had to leave at halftime because it was too much for my dad, my mom, my wife, all to handle. I'm the hardcore guy who wants to sit out there in a poncho and take on the elements to root on my Mountaineers, but I get it. I get it that it's much more comfortable in a way for the home experience. But having 5 games before potentially the weather gets cold out there, and I was even at BYU in November, and it was a game that was like pushing 60 or something before it got dark. So it's I think this is awesome. This is the best you could ask. I think there could be better, could be potentially better, but I like this. I like this schedule. I'm not much of a fan of a bye week before a team's 5th game, just generally speaking. But I like that WVU's first bye week is a true 14-day bye week and not a quasi 9-day bye week that what West Virginia's had to deal with the last 2 seasons. I think that this program likes routine. Neil Brown spoke to this, having set, the practices the way they have it on certain days, so you don't have to necessarily disrupt that flow until you get to the team's second bye week after they've gone to Arizona at the end of October. Then they come back for a bye week to potentially play on a flexed either Thursday, Friday, or Saturday night, week 11 at Cincinnati. And at Cincinnati, I think is probably, right up there with Houston, is the 2 easiest opponents that West Virginia is going to play for the 2024 schedule. So, I'm fine with that. The only 2 opponents that West Virginia plays coming off a bye game is Cincinnati and Baylor in back-to-back weeks in November. Those are the 2 teams I feel like I'm very confident in right here at the end of January, saying that West Virginia could beat or should beat. Definitely will beat. Let's go that profound and say Baylor, Cincinnati, chalk those up at wins. So after looking at it with my first impressions, almost like an NCAA tournament bracket, and you have your first picks before you get into the analysis, doing just an on paper win and loss, and I don't want to get necessarily hung up right now at the end of January and say here is what West Virginia will finish with. Don't want to make that kind of prediction. I'll do that in August. We'll talk about that, before week 1 of the season when all things are ready to go, similarly to like I did at the beginning of this past season. But what I think you can establish is a ceiling, a floor, and a goal right now. Right now, I think you can do that. Ceiling, people might crucify me, here, win or loss. I think is 9-3. I really do. Just taking a step back and looking at the games that I think are going to have very fair unfavorability against are 3 losses. If you're taking into consideration that West Virginia is having 5 ranked opponents to start out the season, yes, we don't know what Penn State, Kansas, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Arizona are going to look like. But there's your 5 right there who are tough games that you all have, like I said, in the first 8 weeks. 8 weeks, 5 potentially ranked opponents. Yes, you have a lot of those games at home, but it just makes it difficult for me having 11 Power 5 opponents. And I'm one who's for it. Who, again, if you're going to play teams that we fans do not care about in Baylor, in Iowa State, in Kansas and Kansas State, give me Penn State, give me Pitt. Please. I don't like going to this model that Ren Baker and Neil Brown want of going to one Power 5 non-conference opponent in Pitt or Virginia Tech, one of the 2, a G5 team, and an FCS. I'm anti. I was anti that in September. So bring it. Give me this. This is what I want to see West Virginia play, and so be it about the record. Because no one anymore is you don't have a chance in what's coming in 2024 if you don't have a considerable schedule that you can point back to and objectively say, yeah, we had these ranked wins, and strength of schedule is going to matter. Against the SEC and against the Big Ten, absolutely, that the Big 12 and the ACC is going to be put under a microscope like we've never seen before for this year. If you don't finish as a conference champion or an undefeated, one loss like TCU did a couple of years ago on the last play of overtime in your conference championship game, you will get knocked out for a 2 or 3 loss SEC school if they played the type of gauntlet schedule that the media is going to portray it as being for this 2024 year. So Ceiling 9-3. I think that would be awesome if West Virginia could do this. That could be an awesome year. So the floor, and if you say, man, you're really hard on, saying it's on the ceiling, what it can be, the floor, I think, is elevated. I think is raised on how good this team can be for this year, and saying it's 6-6. That I don't think you can make excuses anymore the way that 2023 panned out to lose. Even I'll go so far as to say Pitt. I'll say Iowa State. And I'll say a team that you went down to the wire with, both or even all three in the November games that I'm saying are going to be easy. Baylor, Central Florida, Texas Tech. West Virginia cannot take this step backward as a program to, that we're even talking about 4 wins, 5 wins. These are games that now West Virginia has to win, 6-6, bowl game minimum, bare minimum. And I am going to stay consistent even with what I said at the end of the Mayo Bowl, and say the goal for this year, if your ceiling's 9-3, the goal is so high that I think it's 8 wins. I think it's 8 wins to match, to say if the narrative about 2023, the context was you played this easy schedule that contained all the newcomers who were adjusting to the Big 12. You didn't play the Kansas schools who were ranked for most of the year. You didn't play Texas. You didn't play Iowa State, who you really struggled with, and I'll talk about that over the last 5 years. You didn't play any of these tough schools, so no wonder West Virginia got to 8 wins in the regular season and won a bowl game. So you got to repeat that against, like I'm saying, 5 wins or 5 games against teams that will probably be ranked preseason. One of them being Penn State, who we know the history and the schedule against. So that I might be sour on the ceiling, but I'm high on the floor of how good this team can be, and the goal has to be at least to repeat of what 2023 is. If you exceed that goal, win 10, win the conference championship, this could be a season. I think that it's hard to even compare even to those games that West Virginia won in the mid-2000s to early, because we're talking still about a Big E, to use Shane Lyons' words, a watered-down Big East schedule without Miami, without Virginia Tech, and we were playing these, those Big East schools, and still, even look at 2006, underperformed. Salvaged winning a Gator Bowl, and Pat White and Steve Slayton and Noel Devine and Owen Schmidt and so many others made those team, how do I want to say this? They covered up a lot of some of the things that detracted away from those teams. And whether you can if you want to try and compare this 2024 schedule to say 2005, to say 2007, to say 2012, with the Fiesta Bowl, Sugar Bowl, Orange Bowl, we can have that debate, and I would love to have it. But if West Virginia can go out there and put together a conference championship winning team against this schedule, this is a big, big year in the history of West Virginia football. So that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I'm not underselling this team. I think this team has the roster capability with the stability, and this is it. They've geared up for this basically since 2019. This is playing for this year with a lot of talent coming back, especially on the offensive side of the ball. So that's where I'm at. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think I'm high on a 9-3 ceiling? Do you think I'm low on a 6-6 floor? Do you think I'm just right on the goal? Well, let me know in the comments. I'd love to know. So let's break it down game by game. I know I'm 19 minutes already in, but I just kind of want to go on some quick hits here as what I was thinking about as I was going through, on paper, how I felt about these games. Week 1, Penn State. Penn State's going to be incredibly tough. I looked this up a few weeks ago and tweeted out from my personal Twitter account. I think that Penn State, over the course of the last 4 recruiting cycles, and I know today's world of recruiting is different with the transfer portal and transfer recruiting than high school recruiting, but Penn State has done such a good job over these last 4 cycles, James Franklin, that entire program, they have 45 4- and 5-star high school recruits for next year's roster. And there could be still some more transfer movement in and out, and you've already seen what Penn State's done in the transfer portal this year, bringing in Julian Fleming, bringing in, I forget his first name, Colin Rucci, I think it is, from Wisconsin, former 5-star recruits that they brought in. So I'm not even counting those guys. West Virginia has 6. West Virginia has 6 4- to 5-star recruits for its next year's roster. So 45 to 6, Jimmy's and Joe's definitely leans toward the Nittany Lions. Now, why I say it's incredibly tough but not impossible, the reason why what West Virginia returns on this roster offensively, especially what Penn State loses on its roster defensively, Penn State breaking in new coordinators on both sides of the ball, offense, defense. I think Neil Brown will coach this game incredibly different than last year at Happy Valley, not just because of the location, that having a lot to do with it, but also the experience of Garrett Green as having an entire season's worth of starting experience under his belt. He's talked about this in past press conferences during, I think it was either in the recap of the season or after the Penn State game later on in the year. I don't exactly remember where to pinpoint you down to, but he said he called that game differently, and he called, honestly, I think it was probably the first 4 or 5 games differently, letting it go more into the TCU game. You saw that in the second half of the Houston game, and then the second half of the year, letting Garrett loose. He called that game more conservatively than he did. So I think you play Penn State later on in the year in November as compared to week 1. I'm not saying it would have been a West Virginia win, but I think we would have seen a different result. So I think that could be a high-scoring affair that will really come down to turnovers, who makes fewer mistakes, what defenses can hang in the longest. So that's an extremely tough one for me to pick as a W. Week 2, Albany, not going to spend any time on. It's going to be a cakewalk. Hope West Virginia gets some second and third stringers involved in that game, because after playing Penn State week 1, then you go week 3 at Pitt, the backyard brawl. Pitt will not make enough strides between now and then, week 3, so September 14th, offensively to outscore West Virginia. I can say that confidently. If West Virginia plays to its capability, but it's a rivalry game when anything can happen, especially on the road. So could West Virginia win that close and ugly, very similarly to this past year? Yes, and it's not going to change anything. But I feel as this is one of my most confident predictions in picking that as a West Virginia victory right now on paper. I really do. Should have been a win in 2022 and then one in 2023 and changed everything. So then week 4, Kansas at home, the trepidation of catching Jalen Daniels when he's probably, in air quotes, healthy, like West Virginia did, unfortunately, in 2022, is what brings a lot of fear for me for this, because Kansas's offense is talented. And, I don't think now Lance Leipold, I think the Michigan job would have been a job that he would have jumped ship for. There's not any really sort of any coach openings across the country that I think right now that Lance Leipold's leaving. So he's going to be back in Lawrence, Kansas for next year. That program has made a huge investment in him, he and them as well. So there's a lot of juice, there's a lot of momentum in Kansas, especially now with Jalen Daniels announcing that he'll be back for 2024. Probably made a significant NIL deal on that. But I like West Virginia's chances against Kansas, being that it's at home versus on the road. Kansas's first 3 weeks are pretty easy. Some school named Lindenwood, that sounds like a golf course 15 minutes down the road from me. I don't know who Lindenwood is. Illinois and UNLV, who did play better in 2023, caught fire, I think won 8 or 9 games, fell flat in their bowl game to end the season. But West Virginia is going to be, on the road, is going to be Kansas's first real test. So once again, high-scoring affair. That one's going to be an electric. And then you go into the bye week. And like I said at the beginning, full 2-week bye here before going to Oklahoma State and you have 2 weeks to game plan for a Mike Gundy team who might look, a little wonky to start out the year like they did this past year in starting 3 quarterbacks in the first 3 games. Do you get Alan Bowman for all 12 games of the season, non-conference, the way they play? I don't know. I don't know, but it's nice that you'll have that 2 weeks, I feel like. And they're going to play a tough stretch before they get to West Virginia. So prior to that, I know Arkansas is kind of rebuilding after a real down year in 2023, playing Arkansas, at Tulsa, Utah, and at Kansas State. So West Virginia coming off a bye for that matchup against the Cowboys on the road. Oklahoma State's got a bit of a tough stretch there 4 weeks in before playing the Mountaineers. So what I'll have to say about Oklahoma State, and I think I can pair this with Week 14 against Texas Tech, I think take your pick here or as to which road game West Virginia loses. Those are 2 environments, Stillwater and Lubbock, that West Virginia just does not perform traditionally under Neil Brown, but even sometimes with Dana Holgorsen. Going back this full Big 12 dozen years, I feel more favorably about winning at Texas Tech at the end of the season versus at the beginning when Tech's usually healthy and firing on all cylinders offensively. And we saw that with Tyler Shuck. It could have been a totally different game this past September had it been Shuck for 4 quarters, rather Baron Morton. He gets injured. We know how the weather played a factor into that contest. But again, you watch Texas Tech in that season finale against Texas, they got destroyed. 57-7. That was embarrassing for Texas Tech. Yeah, they won their bowl game to finish out the year with a positive record, but they had such greater heights in 2024. So I'm glad West Virginia is not playing at Texas Tech early and instead late. I don't like playing Kansas early versus late, but I'll take it. So I think they can split either a win against the Red Raiders, which I would feel more comfortable with, or a win at Oklahoma State. That's just how I feel on paper and how I got to what I'm talking about with 9-3. So Week 7, Iowa State, I think this has got to be a win. Why I say that? Not only to justify the Nico Marchiol over Rocco Becht signing, Rocco Becht being the son of Anthony Becht, probably the best tight end in West Virginia football, history. So you passed on his son to go for Nico Marchiol, and what Rocco Becht did playing as a true or redshirt freshman this past year for the Cyclones. So I also think that this is a game that'll prove, is Neil Brown better of a coach than Matt Campbell? And Brown/WVU's way of doing things is better than Campbell and Iowa State's. You're at home. I think West Virginia looked abysmal there 2 years ago in 2022. And if you didn't fire Neil Brown after that Kansas loss, after losing the backyard brawl, that game in Ames was like watching, being the outsider looking in at a funeral. That was such an ugly game down there in Ames. You won on a prayer against Iowa State in 2021 with the Bryce Ford Wheaton catch, the fumble by Breece Hall, the calls at the end on the final drive by Iowa State that led to West Virginia pulling it out at the end with enough time on the clock against Brock Purdy, who now is in the Super Bowl. You got blown out in 2020 and 2019, and we obviously remember the deflating loss that was in 2018, true freshman Brock Purdy in their newly unveiled all-black uniforms in Ames. So I think this is a benchmark game for the program. It's a toss-up, but I feel like you got to win this game. You got to win that Iowa State game in October at home. Might be the homecoming game. It's either going to be, Kansas, I feel like, or Iowa State. So it might be Iowa State to get up for that game. Love to see, what West Virginia can do. Week 8 and Week 9, I'm going to put in a vacuum as well. Kansas State, Arizona, one being home, one being on the road. I see West Virginia splitting. I'm leaning more toward the home loss against Kansas State and the road win, despite what many fans believe is West Virginia's toughest, not only toughest road game, but might be toughest game, period. Even over Penn State Given the way that Arizona, I know with head coach Jed Fish there in 2023, I view Kansas State, talk about the Wildcats first, in the same light as I do Oklahoma State. Very similar programs, I feel like, especially now that Chris Kleiman's the head coach. High-level coaching. West Kansas State wins with toughness and defense primarily, and not making mistakes. First and foremost, not making mistakes to beat yourself. And that's how they lost against Oklahoma State this past season, was the turnovers by Will Howard in that contest. Where you can see, that's what Kansas State is best at, is taking advantage of your mistakes. And that's what happened against the Mountaineers in 2022, is too many turnovers at the first, in the first part by Garrett Green. That was the game, you remember, he kind of got like the full start in after the Oklahoma win. And West Virginia's defense was terrible. I think gave up like 35 or 38 points in the first half, which I think was like a record of the last, I don't know how many decades. I remember when I looked up the recap to that, it was just West Virginia hadn't given up 38 first half points in a very, very long time. Even that 2012 Baylor game. So that was a bad one. So K-State, very tough program. Really respect them. Arizona, what I have to say is I think that one's going to be a lot of fun. That one's going to be fun, viewing it like a bowl game trip, 2,100 miles away from home. I'd love to know this stat. I'd have to look it up, but I'm pretty sure, yeah. The furthest in-conference trip West Virginia's ever taken as a football program, got to be the furthest, right? Got to be the furthest, going from Morgantown to Tucson, 2,100 miles. And we'll know by that point in time, the end of October, whether year 2 of Noah Fafita and Tetaroa McMillan, do they come back down to earth without Jed Fish as the head coach there? Was that a flash in the pan year by Arizona, even though they were led by guys who were underclassmen? To be determined with Arizona playing on the road. That one's going to be awesome. Then you head into a bye week, quasi-bye week, Week 11's flexed right now, sitting at either West Virginia playing Cincinnati on a Thursday, a Friday, or a Saturday, to be determined by the television network. So don't know with that one just yet. Like I said kind of at the outset, despite the irregular turnaround and kind of shift in the routine that it will create, all while staying on the road, Arizona to Cincinnati. I think this is probably my second or third most confident win. The only reason I don't have it first is because of the road factor. I think Cincinnati's in a deep rebuild. Same with Houston. Don't know if they have the right head coaching staff. They got a lot of issues before they're ever going to be considered contenders in this conference. So very confident about that Cincinnati game. And conversely, the next week against Baylor at home, week 12. Baylor can't beat West Virginia in Morgantown. They're cursed. They call it the curse of 2020 or 2012. I just don't see them taking that step back to relevance in 2024, at least to the degree that I'm not feeling confident about beating them in Morgantown. I have full confidence that West Virginia, in front of its home crowd, just has the Bears' edge and will win that one. Week 13 against UCF, Senior Day. I think at this point in time of the season, the weekend before Thanksgiving, KJ Jefferson's going to be thinking about his prospects in the USFL or being an undrafted free agent for the NFL draft. Much like Keaton Slovis was when he got benched when BYU came to Morgantown in November this past season. I think UCF has a lot of offensive firepower. They've recruited highly for this high school class. But again, if you're relying on true freshmen to make major impacts for your program, what does that say about you competitively in the third most competitive conference of college football? Yes, R.J. Harvey, great running back. Javon Baker, great wide receiver. You bring in Jefferson, who has the experience playing at Arkansas, but I think I like the prospects of John Rice Plumlee a little better, than I do of KJ Jefferson at the helm. So what will UCF be like with only 2 games left to play in the season? Again, in a maybe cold Morgantown, different than Orlando, but then again, it was warm in November this year. That Cincinnati game wasn't all that bad. So I don't know. But I feel confident about that one, also that it being at home. Last game, Texas Tech. I don't want to spend too much time on this. I think I've talked about that enough. Do they have enough gas in the tank at the end of the season, playing for something? And they have to play Oklahoma State on the road the week prior. So what is Texas Tech? Is Baron Morton even the quarterback? Are they trying to break somebody in new? Like, what do the Red Raiders look like? So that's a look at game by game. My thoughts, my feelings, where I came to with a 9-3 ceiling, 6-6 floor, and then goal of 8 wins. So does WVU have the depth to be able to play this kind of schedule? And I think yes. I'll feel confident in saying that, looking at what West Virginia returns, what West Virginia has done in the transfer portal this season, it's predominantly on what they've returned and the cohesion that they have on the offensive side of the ball, especially. That you bring back Green and Markey, all your running backs are set. I think I may have changed my tune on Jalen Anderson just to take 5 seconds and talk about this. That, like, bad plays that almost are a premonition of things to come stick with me. Call it my superstition, call it whatever you want. But that fumble by DJ Oliver in that, was it Baylor game? I think it was. Baylor game. Just leaves me with a bad taste in my mouth, and not seeing Anderson hit the portal after the beginning of the season and wanting to stick around for the spring. Maybe the coaching staff keeps him around and he's the third guy in the rotation, even though he's a redshirt junior, fourth-year player, C.J. Donaldson ahead of him, Jaheim White ahead of him. He's absolutely going to get third string carries, and even behind a rushing quarterback in Garrett Green. So I don't know necessarily if I trust DJ Oliver just yet, or one of the new guys in Dior Hubbard, Trayvon Dunbar, who are true freshmen. So you might see Anderson stick around and West Virginia keep him. 9 guys across the board at the wide receiver spot that I really like to catch passes. You got your 2 deep at tight end, and your receiving tight end and Cole Taylor, your blocking tight end and Traylon Davis. I feel good about the entire starting 5, especially the left side with Wyatt Milam next to Tomas Remak. And I feel really good about the second string guys who will push the first string guys who are right now on paper slated to be the starters, and Kyle Altuner at center, Sullivan Weidman at right guard, and Xavier Blasi at right tackle. Who knows? Could see all 3 of those guys being starters by the end of the season. We don't know. So then, on the defensive side of the ball, not to the same kind of level that I see as the offense, but you have your depth established, I feel like. Sean Martin took a step back in 2023. I think that was mainly due to injuries, is the way I feel, and read into the situation and look at the numbers. Eddie Vesterinen played up, and now you bring in TJ Jackson, who, looking at his highlight tape, I like him more and more by everything I see about him. So if Zyke Lawton, Asani Redwood can push those 3 guys to potentially get into the rotation that went 10 deep this past year, and then at the nose tackle, Fatorma Mulba, Hammond Russell, and Fatorma Mulba played better. I can't not go through a press conference, it feels like, with Neil Brown and not hear him talk about Corey McIntyre. And they're really high on this nose tackle, true freshman Nate Gabriel, who has the size to get in there and play a few snaps a game, it feels like. So all kind of, I feel like, B-level players who, if you rotate them in and keep them fresh enough, keep them on their snap counts, think you'll be okay by season's end. So the linebackers are going to be new territory, especially the outside linebackers. Ty French on one side, Tyron Bradley on the other side. Then there's a lot of unknown behind them. Your middle linebackers, your Mike and your Will. I like the 2 deep a lot. Reed Carrico, Josiah Trotter, who'll be coming back from injury, who we didn't get to see in 2023, and Trey Lathan, also coming back from injury, and Ben Cutter. So I like that 2 deep there in the middle to help out with your defensive line that, again, still a 3 down front, but you got these guys who I'm hoping that they're rushing the quarterback more in 2024, and we'll see that. So then at the safeties, and this is where I think why we saw 2 decommitments in Josh Minkins and Taj Rael over the course of the last month. Decommit after committing there in the transfer portal. Aubrey Burks, and Anthony Wilson, your 2 starting safeties. And then at corners, you got 4 guys I feel like are competing for 2 spots. Montre Miller, Aiden Garnes, Jacoby Spells, TJ Crandall. It'll be interesting to see what West Virginia does with those guys who are the backups, who aren't necessarily playing starting snaps at the 2 corners. Do they rotate them in? Potentially, if you need to spell Burks or Wilson for a pair, use them in different sub packages. And then, so really interested to see if West Virginia tries and add another safety this cycle in the spring, or if they try and go get some credible, or some get upgrades to back up at the outside linebacker position behind French and Bradley. So I don't know what they're going to do if one of those guys goes down with an injury, or you're playing some guys who really don't have much starting experience defensively. So I think the goal from here on out, you know what, I'll pause there. Already 40 minutes in, trying to keep these videos shorter. I can kind of go off on rails. So that's my 2 cents. Schedule, depth, can they compete? Can they win? This is going to be an awesome year. What are your thoughts on this schedule? What games are you most excited for? Where do you see potential pitfalls, trap games? What games do you have circled on your list of how this season can go one way or another? Does West Virginia kind of have the star power and then quality depth needed to be a league contender? Do you see them as a league contender? Do you see them up in the same realm as Utah, Kansas State, these teams that are getting some of the preseason hype in the Big 12 conference? Do you see West Virginia making some noise and can go pound for pound for Penn State? What do I know? 45, 4 and 5 stars versus 6. West Virginia can do it at home. So I'd love to know your thoughts. If you like this video, smash that like button so that more Mountaineer fans around YouTube can see it. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your dog that I do this each and every week and have a lot of fun doing it. I'm going to talk either later this week or next week about tickets, fan experience, what all goes into what West Virginia can do as an athletic department, university, to make the fan experience have more value because of how high the cost to go to games. We've talked about a little bit back in the fall, but I kind of want to bring that back since we're not necessarily in the meat of the season. We're in the off season and can talk about these kind of things. So tune in for that. And I appreciate it, y'all. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next week. Hail West Virginia. Let's go.